Which title immediately comes to mind if asked to name an iconic shoot-em-up? Is it Gradius, Ikaruga, or maybe Musha? I guess it depends on your age. Some would probably say River Raid, others Death Smiles. For me, and probably a lot of you watching, it's gotta be R-Type. My first experience with R-Type was on TurboGrafx 16. In my opinion, a truly difficult horizontal shooter. Only mastered through several trial and error runs. As a 5-6-year-old kid, it felt impossible. 30 years later, it still does. My dad was a huge fan. So much he thought Polestar was a sequel. Who can blame him? During its prime, R-Type was a recognizable name with a particular aesthetic and playstyle. Even when sequels jumped from sprites to polygons, R-Type managed to look like, well, R-Type. While later games eased up on difficulty, I still find them to be a lot of fun. In the early 2000s, I recall reading about R-Type Final through an unofficial PlayStation magazine, eventually borrowing it from a good friend, and it was an excellent send-off to the series, only held back by unavoidable slowdown. Over 100 ships are unlockable, one of them being a variation of the R9, Leo, the same ship found in an arcade exclusive, R-Type Leo. At first glance seeming similar to past entries, Leo makes some small yet drastic gameplay changes. For one, charge attacks, or rather the wave cannon, is absent. Additionally, R-Type's iconic force is also missing. In an attempt at consolidating offensive and defensive options, a new shield bit system was implemented, which Leo can launch at enemies, instantly latching onto them for massive damage. Because they also act as your defense, until they reel back in, you're much more vulnerable. This is still R-Type, meaning weapon pickups are directly tied to shield bits, just as force weapon upgrades. It's surprisingly balanced around this new mechanic, as dying instantly respawns players instead of at designated checkpoints, giving R-Type Leo an entirely different flow than other entries. In place of studying stage patterns and putting that knowledge to good use, you're charging in and out of levels. It's pretty cool. I can go on about R-Type Leo, like Leo's thrusters activating when moving around and how some of the music is unforgettable. Stage 2 has one of the best tracks in the entire series.
3, 2, 1, let's go!
Sadly, the only way to play R-Type Leo is through emulation. Did you notice how indie shooters have just as much love put into them as some bigger, well-known titles? More specifically, Bullet Hell. Crimson Clover and Danmaku Unlimited 3 are some of the best examples in recent times. Fast-paced action alongside rocking music, keeping players pumped, but can also be a brutal challenge to overcome. Some may even find dying a bit of a buzzkill, with or without unlimited continues. For me, it's not as entertaining losing ship after ship, bomb after bomb, to see the credits roll. Scoring, mastering levels, and learning tough bullet patterns in hopes of not dying is all part of the fun. Learning shmups is a lot like fighting games, and like fighters, every game has a different approach teaching what's important to players. M2 does it by showcasing vital information on screen. If you ask me, it can be a bit overwhelming, especially at first glance. For pros, this is great. Gameplay mechanics are best learned through gradual difficulty increases. Jamestown, Legend of the Lost Colony, does it right. A content-filled shoot-em-up reminiscent of Dodonpachi and somewhat of Giga Wing. Jamestown takes place in some weird alternate time period. The story presented is strange and quite unbelievable. One moment you're firing at hostile aliens, next you're speaking with John Smith on Mars. Gameplay wise, you'll fly vertically through various stages, blasting tentacle things, giant butterflies, as well as various steampunk machinery. Anyone familiar with Dodonpachi will feel right at home. Even its opening stage pays homage. But unlike Cave's infamously brutal shooter, Jamestown eases you into eventual bullet hell. A total of 5 difficulty modes are present. By the time you reach legendary difficulty, upwards of 12 varied ships could be unlocked. Lobbing bombs, shooting missiles, waving around a huge sword, it's a lot of fun. Some even contain custom loadouts or builds, modifying how you play even further thanks to a variety of shot patterns and more. That crazy giggle-wing comparison I made earlier has to do with how enemy bullets can be stopped in place. Unfortunately, they can't be reflected back like in giggle-wing. Jamestown is beautiful. I wish more 2D sprite work like this was common. Bosses fill up entire screens, enemy designs are great. Overall, everything looks stunning. Aside from clearing all stages and reaching a higher score, a ton of unlockables are available. This is even 4 players. My father was unlike any dad out there. He loved Lords of Thunder, Terra Diver, and Brickinger. I mention these beloved shootemups because it's an example of what he bought through mail-in order or Game Express. We wanted a Super Nintendo, so he bought a TurboGrafx-16. His favorite console was the Neo Geo CD. He bought games one by one before bringing the console home. I'll never forget my initial batch of games. Metal Slug 1, Top Hunter, King of Fighters 95, Polestar, and Last Resort. Let's talk about this one, shall we? In my opinion, Last Resort, specifically on Neo Geo CD, is among the best shooters ever made. You're probably asking how Last Resort can be considered underrated when it's at least one of Neo Geo's best. Well, I haven't seen it on many top shoot 'em up lists. Just doesn't get enough love on YouTube. Presentation is top tier. From a haunting intro to the grand opening stage. No doubt inspired by Akira. Sirens going off, cars getting caught in the crossfire, and exiting the cityscape looming is a giant crater with God knows what inside. Last Resort has a distinct grit, more than most shooters. There's this hopeless feeling throughout, reinforced by desolate environments, ruined sunken cities, cold factory mines polluting the air, and space. This may sound a bit odd, but I always found Last Resort's space level to be scary. I'm serious. I love how you don't start in space either. A level of escalation exists from one stage to another, and difficulty adds to that escalation. Because this game is tough. Collision is one of your worst enemies. Aside from crashing, crowd control is also important to survival. Many times you'll be pressured by bullets accumulated from enemy synergy. When not taken care of immediately, it can become unmanageable. A Haro looking ball power-up works a lot like R-Type's Force. However, it can be manipulated 360 degrees around your ship. On top of locking in place, you can throw from any angle. Positioning Haro makes all the difference in close quarters. This presents an opening for eating away enemy health. Stages are designed to be hazardous, so every advantage for quick kills is incentivized. Even if it results in death, it's really satisfying. Gameplay doesn't break any barriers. Polish is what shines through here. Graphically, looking at Last Resort brings me back to the mid-90s. Neo Geo games had a certain look. The level of detail back then blew me away and still holds up even today. Look at the light shining through these vents. Check out your ship's death animation. How about this dreary continue countdown? Oh, and I can't talk about Last Resort without touching on its amazing soundtrack. More specifically, the Neo Geo CD version. Without these tracks, I'd argue stages don't feel the same. I'm serious. The AES version might as well be a different game. Take a listen. It's a shame you'd have to either emulate or fork up $100 to play the CD version.